Friends, today I'm going to talk about public diplomacy. You remember, we had identified the 4 pillars of diplomacy as political, economic, public diplomacy, and consular and diaspora affairs. But before I get into public diplomacy, can I make a request? If you like these videos, perhaps you might subscribe to them so that every time a new video is uploaded, you get a little message in your inbox. I hope you enjoy them and I look forward to your feedback. Okay, the usual 3 points. Public diplomacy as a practice is as old as governance. But public diplomacy as a concept in diplomacy is fairly new. What do I mean? From the days of kings and chiefs of tribes, it was always understood by the leader that he, and in those days the leaders tended mostly to be men, it was understood that he needed the support of publics. Therefore, whatever kind of regime, whatever kind of governance structure, they needed the support of the people. They wanted a connection with the people. During World War II, President Roosevelt had his fireside chats. And what was that about? It was in order to communicate to the American people through the radio. Remember, in those days, that was the quickest instant means of communication. It was important to reach out to people. And Churchill did the same in his own way through the House of Commons and the radio. Then somebody put forward the notion that in addition to speaking to fellow governments and government institutions, countries should connect with people, the publics of other countries, in order to tell them their narrative and indirectly win their support. And in the process, they also came to realize that they need to talk to domestic publics. That is really what public diplomacy is all about. It's about public communication. Now, there's an interesting point there. This is the only field of diplomacy that really connects in a big way with the corporate world. Because public communications, public relations, image management are all very important to companies. So we have lots of professionals from these disciplines who are attracted by public diplomacy. The result? We have more journals, more books, more websites, and more teaching of public diplomacy in the last 20-25 years than in any other field of diplomatic studies. Not political diplomacy, not security affairs, not economic diplomacy, but public diplomacy. It's become a sexy subject, you could say. My second big point is that public diplomacy is a set of methods, ways in which governments and institutions, say universities, say media entities, newspapers, cultural entities, connect with people because they need understanding across borders and they need understanding with home publics. Now, a foreign ministry is essentially involved with foreign affairs. So where does foreign affairs connect with domestic publics? It does because they need, governments realize that they want home publics to understand international affairs in a holistic manner. So that first, They will support the government, they will support the country, and they will not be swayed by the arguments of another country that may seduce them with radio broadcasts, television shows, or whatever it may be, or visits, sponsored visits, paid visits, freebies. So governments now realize that connecting with external publics and home publics and connecting with institutions of these entities is very important. Some countries took the position that diplomacy is only conducted abroad. So if we talk of public diplomacy, it means diplomacy aimed at foreign publics. Sounds logical. In America, there is actually a law passed in 1948 that prohibits the federal government from spending money to reach out to domestic publics. So, is there no domestic public diplomacy in the US? Far from it. You look at President Trump. Most of his tweets are really addressed to domestic publics when he talks about foreign affairs. When he is upset with some foreign country that it's not engaging in fair trade as he understands it, or is allowing refugees to come into the United States, he is really reaching out to domestic publics to tell them something about a foreign affairs related issue. The story of Germany is interesting. Initially, they also took the line that, the German Foreign Office addresses foreign publics to convince them of the importance of Germany. They came up with a lovely slogan, Germany as a land of ideas. They wanted to get away from the narrative of Germany simply as a country of precision where wonderful machinery and automobiles and motorcycles were manufactured. And they are right. Germany is an incredible land of ideas. But then around 2012, the German Foreign Office published a report in which they said, it is very important for us to reach out to home publics in order to convince them of our position on foreign affairs. Voila. But there are many countries that understood this all along, that public diplomacy addresses home and foreign publics. Then there is another related issue. Where does the country brand and the notion of soft power fit into public diplomacy? Now, these are both extremely important concepts. Each one would probably take at least one talk, one module, one episode to describe fully. But I will say in brief, soft power is a notion that was put forward by a brilliant political scientist, international affairs specialist, Joseph Nye. I know Joseph Nye slightly, and he has produced some wonderful books that narrate the story and the importance of soft power. Then there is the question of the country brand. So now countries realize that just as Jaguar is a brand, or Chanel is a brand to be protected by those that own it, that offer products made by the companies with this brand. The country is a brand, and the country also needs to be marketed in an attractive fashion. Now obviously, it's not like a brand that you are selling something. You are not selling your country, but you are selling a certain idea of your country. You will get tourists that way, you will get businessmen to think of coming to your country to invest, you will get foreign students, you will get a whole series of external connections through foreign entities and your home entities. But what do you need in the brand, first of all? The brand must be authentic. You can't tell a lie. You can't stand up and say, my country is a land of milk and honey, when it is in fact locked down under some kind of a misguided regime that doesn't deliver prosperity to its own people. So, the brand must be authentic. Let me go back to soft power. Soft power is a seductive idea. So there are people who say, oh, we've done this or that, and we've built our soft power. Now, soft power is not built in a hurry. Soft power comes through actions that endure over time. Let me tell you the story of yoga. It is to the credit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi that he hit upon the simple idea of declaring through the United Nations an International Yoga Day. And I think members of the opposition political parties in India were a little upset. Upset because it had not occurred to them, to be honest. Anyway, soft power and country brand are outcomes of public diplomacy actions. But I don't want to get too much into comparing public diplomacy, soft power, and country brand, because that is like a rabbit hole. You can get into it and then you will tie yourself in knots trying to work out a neat distinction, similarities, definitional connections between these. Just think about these and ponder over it. Let me end my third point now about a few country examples. The United States offers a certain vision of itself. Hollywood, for example, is a great promoter of an American brand. Now, is there some office in America that says this will be the brand we will market? No. Every film producer, every film director does his own thing. The actors come and act their hearts out, and they add to the brand image of the United States. In India, we have a massive film industry, produces over 1,000 films a day, by far the largest producer in the world, not just in Hindi, but in many regional languages. We never thought of these popular films as really something that had intrinsic, deeper value, until the rest of the world told us that they loved the Bollywood song and dance sequences, that these were in fact attributes of India. So we came to realize the value of Bollywood through the eyes of foreigners and the eyes of the Indian diaspora that began to migrate abroad in large numbers in what I call the modern wave of Indian migration that took place around the 70s onwards. Think of China. China spends $10 billion a year, $10 billion on its global TV network, on its Confucius centers, etc. And it comes back a little disappointed at its brand value or its soft power. Well, this is a consequence of the fact that when you market yourself, when you present yourself as an attractive entity, people are going to ask, what values do you stand for? Are you credible in what you do? And I'm afraid China faces real problems in this area. Then you have small countries like Mauritius, like the Maldives, like Trinidad and Tobago, the many Caribbean states, countries in the South Pacific like Fiji, Samoa. They do a splendid job of presenting themselves to the world. They are not hostile to anyone. They don't threaten anyone. They are simply seen as nice people. And they then attract a brand value. They project their soft power. You know what is Fiji's national slogan, tourism slogan? Fiji me. It doesn't mean anything, but it sounds very nice. And the Maldives slogan is the sunny side of life. What a lovely, evocative way of presenting yourself. So, I could go on with examples. Think of Australia, presents itself in a very interesting way. But sometimes even great countries can make small mistakes. Some years back, there was a Canadian campaign for tourism to attract tourists. It presented the sights and the beauties of Canada and ended by saying, "Why the bloody hell aren't you here?" Then they realized that you don't have to use that kind of language to attract people. So Australia now uses much softer language. And of course, Australia is enormously successful in attracting tourists. New Zealand simply presents itself as a natural paradise, as a place where nature is protected and presented in all its glory. So, I think I have come to my end of my episode on public diplomacy, but I will come back in a second episode where I want to talk about how contemporary diplomacy and the internet connect. That's a very interesting subject. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy these little conversations and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you. Bye-bye.